Have you ever wondered, what if one of the dinosaurs never went extinct? What would they look like? What would they sound like? Where would they live? What would it be like to live among them? Would they be anything like us? Descendants of prehistoric creatures still walk among us, right here in Michigan. Sandhill cranes are among the oldest living bird species on Earth. Fossils dating from millions of years ago have been discovered in North America. It makes you wonder, what do they think? What kind of lives do they live? And how do they coexist with us humans, who haven't been around nearly as long?
There's a lake in Michigan, 40 miles or so north of Detroit. It's not very big, and you wouldn't even know it's there. But it's absolutely perfect if you're a sandhill crane.
Never even heard of a sandhill crane until we moved out to this house in Oxford, Michigan that backs up to a small, shallow lake. And it has lots of wildlife and all different kinds of birds going back there. We get egrets, herons, swans, and geese. But it was the sandhill cranes that really captured my attention. They're different than the other birds. They're tall, they're gangly and awkward, and maybe I felt a special connection to them. But mostly it was interesting to see what they were doing. Each day they were doing something different, always something going on back there. Of course, most of all, is their big, crazy calls, right? They're loud and they're just making noise, it seems like at first. But then I would pay more attention and realize that they are calling other cranes that are far away, and I'd hear them way off in the distance answering. And sometimes this would go on for a while. They seem to be talking about things, a lot like we'd have a telephone call. Sometimes they maybe were telling a story about what happened during the day, or saying, I'm safe now, I'm home, I'm going to stay in this spot tonight. Other times they were organizing, they're making plans, maybe for migration or just to get together and say hello, but they'll all come together at a certain time on a certain day and right behind our house sometimes and have a little meeting and talk and do their thing and then fly off. So it's just fascinating to think that these creatures are living lives just like we are, and I get to watch just because of where I happen to live. As I listened, though, I realized that there's different calls that they make. They make different sounds, different lengths. There's things going on there that I wish I could understand better. I figure there's someone out there in the world maybe that has cracked the code and deciphered crane language. And wouldn't it be neat to know what they're talking about, what they're saying, what they're planning, What do cranes have to say to each other?
Mostly I just enjoyed watching the cranes until I took a course called Conservation Steward through the Michigan State University Extension Program. And we had to do a capstone project, and I thought I would make a little film about sandhill cranes. And so then I started filming them.
And that's when I started myself to realize what was going on with them as they did their calls and their routines. I got to learn about their lives just by observation, and that's pretty cool. So a lot of that is what I want to share with you, is what I saw, what I heard, and what those cranes are doing out there.
Sometimes when riding my bike around town, I would see the cranes. It was nice to know where they spent their time when they were away. I wondered if they recognized me. There's one crane that's been around here for years that has something wrong with his leg. He seems to get along okay. I wonder if my cranes are his parents. The locals call him Gimpy. People who are seeing him for the first time often try to get help. I can recognize him by the way his leg sticks out when he flies. One day in the spring, the sandhill cranes were calling all morning long in a different way than usual. It sounded like they were making an announcement. They came in our backyard with their little baby crane known as a colt. It felt like they brought their baby to show me. So we spent all day looking at this crane, watching them feed it worms and kind of nudge it around with their beaks. So we took pictures, and it was just the sweetest and cutest thing ever. When night came, it was a really cold night. And in the morning, the cranes are still in their usual spot back by the edge of the water, but we couldn't see the baby. Upon close inspection, I found just a little bit of orange fluff floating in the water next to them. The baby didn't make it. And it might be my imagination, but the cranes stood there in that spot for days after, not doing their usual thing. They just stood there in that spot looking really sad. I've since learned that sandhill crane colts do not have a very good survival rate. The mother crane will lay 1 to 2 eggs a year, and of those, maybe one will survive to adulthood every 3 to 4 years. I thought about sandhill cranes a lot. I did research to learn all I could about them.
Standing and almost 4 feet tall, sandhill cranes are Michigan's tallest breeding birds. Their wingspans can exceed 5 feet across. They fly with their necks stretched out straight. which is different from herons who curl theirs up into an S shape. There are 15 different species of cranes currently in the world, and 11 of them are threatened with extinction. Sandhill cranes and other birds were once abundant in Michigan, but at the start of the 20th century, their numbers decreased drastically. Walter Bradford Barrows was an American naturalist and professor of biology at the Michigan State Agricultural College, which later became Michigan State University. In 1912, he wrote the book Michigan Bird Life, considered to be the most comprehensive book on the subject at the time. Barrows predicted that the species would abandon Michigan. He wrote that the population was stressed because
the sandhill crane has been a favorite mark for the rifle. Its flesh forms palatable food, and its nesting grounds have been lessened through drainage. It seems certain that its numbers are decreasing steadily, and before many years, in all probability, it will desert the state altogether, seeking nesting places farther north and west, where it can find greater security.
Barrows' predictions almost came true. A survey in 1931 found only 17 pairs of sandhill cranes left in the state. Back then, birds were considered to be an inexhaustible resource and were hunted without regulation, causing many species to go extinct. Passenger pigeons were once so abundant, their flocks would form clouds that could block out the sun. Yet by 1912, they were completely gone from the earth. Forever. Another factor that caused bird populations to decline ultimately led to changes that would result in their protection. That factor was the fashion trend of putting feathers, and sometimes whole birds, on fancy ladies' hats. Harriet Lawrence Hemingway, a Boston socialite, was horrified by an ornithologist's description of herons being shot down in their nesting grounds, leaving their orphaned babies to perish alone. She and her cousin Minna B. Hall invited their rich friends to tea parties to tell them how birds were suffering for the sake of style. Their influence led to boycotts of feathered hats and the formation of the first Audubon Society. The millinery and hunting industries pushed back. They labeled the women extremists and self-righteous sentimentalists. But their perseverance eventually led to passage of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which made it a federal crime to take birds or bird parts, including feathers, or to kill migratory birds. With feathered hats out of style and this new law in place, many bird species were able to recover, including Michigan's sandhill cranes. Hats off to a conservation success. You may notice that most sandhill cranes look similar to one another, but that their colors change across the season. As part of their springtime grooming regimen, sandhill cranes paint their feathers with mud. Iron in the mud stains their feathers to a rusty brown. And by the fall, they will look gray.
Sandhill cranes are known for their elaborate courtship dances. When young colts reach maturity at about 2 years old, they select a mate and then remain a couple for life. They show affection for each other by dancing and playing and by doing their special call of unison. In the spring, a crane couple works together, building their nest by mounding up cattails and sedge grass. It may take 4 to 5 years before a mom lays her first egg, and they will only lay 1, sometimes 2, per year. The cranes take turns, incubating the egg for about a month, and if all goes well, a fuzzy golden baby crane, known as a colt, will hatch. The parents work hard to feed, teach, and protect their little one, but their survival rates aren't very good, with colts successfully reaching maturity only 1 out of every 3 or 4 years. Cranes, their eggs, and their young face many dangers in this world, both natural and man-made.
In 2017, I came across an article in the Detroit Free Press about how our state legislature was considering a resolution to initiate and approve hunting of sandhill cranes in Michigan. And my first thought was, why would anyone want to do that? How much fun would that be? They just stand around all day in the same place at the same time, doing the same thing. It's not very exciting.
But when I looked into it some more, I saw the information provided to the representatives about why hunting sandhills is different from other waterfowl due to their slow reproduction rate, the genetic bottleneck, concerns about hunting in a breeding ground. It seemed to be a clear decision. When the issue came before the House for a vote, I expected to see a discussion about all the factual and scientific data, but instead they showed a recipe and a picture of Eurasian cranes in Israel swarming a tractor because they were being fed from it. The presenter claimed that the cranes were a nuisance to farmers and that hunting them would solve the problem. Then, without further discussion, they held a voice vote, declared it done, and moved along. Apparently, this is the way decisions were being made in our state government, and I wasn't okay with it. I couldn't believe that's how important decisions were being handled in our state legislature. But what could I do about it? Well, I could run for office myself, so I did.
Hi, my name is Mindy Denninger, and I would like to represent District 46 in the Michigan State House of Representatives. And I ran on a sandhill crane platform. I like to ride my bike on our local trails, catch fish, and watch the birds. That's actually what got me interested in the Michigan legislature. I talked about sandhill cranes a lot. And I will tell you a little story. It's about sandhill cranes. Let me tell you a story about sandhill cranes. These guys, the sandhill cranes. Sandhill cranes. Kind of a bird watcher, and the cranes are my favorite. Sandhill cranes. In case you don't know about sandhill cranes, I have a story about sandhill cranes that I'm not going to tell you. Because most of you have heard my speech.
While I crushed my primary,
In the end, I didn't win the job, but I did get to talk about sandhill cranes, and I learned that people out there really care about them.
Cranes are all around, even above us, way above us. Look to the southern night sky, and you might see the crane constellation Grus. This summer constellation is called Ajijak, named by the Great Lakes area indigenous Anishinaabe peoples. It resembles a sandhill crane in flight, its long legs trailing behind. The Gun Lake tribe in western Michigan is called the Crane Clan, and their tribal seal includes a crane. Cranes are featured in art. People put statues of them on their lawns. We name streets after them and feature them in logos. The Cranbrook Educational Community in Bloomfield Hills was named after the founder's ancestral home in Kent, England. It originally meant Crane Marsh. The crane is the name of the school's paper and mascot, and cranes were built right into the walls of the historic architecture there.
to further my studies about sandhill cranes in culture, we traveled to Jackson to experience Sandhill Crane Vineyards.
You can also find cranes on bottles of wine at Sandhill Crane Vineyards in Jackson, Michigan. It's a family-owned business that makes their award-winning wine out of 100% Michigan-grown fruit and is located along a sandhill crane migration path.
A heated deck wraps around the building where you can sit and enjoy food, wine, and a view of cranes flying by at sunset. People really seem to love this place. I do too. This is the Phyllis Hanel, Michigan Audubon Bird Sanctuary. It's northeast of Jackson, Michigan, and it's a known habitat for sandhill cranes and a flyover spot for them, where they like to come down and rest for the night at this area behind me. So we're over here waiting.
Bird watching requires a lot of patience and looking and more patience and still more looking. You may not see anything interesting for quite some time. And then you look and you see and you wonder, is that? No, it wasn't. And then look! No, that's just a heron. But then you hear that familiar call, and it was all worth it.
If you want to go someplace where you'll be sure to see some sandhill cranes, you can go to the Detroit Zoo. I did. There are 3 male sandhill cranes here, each with its own story. Waco was rescued as a chick with an injured wing in Waco, Texas. Now he lives here at the zoo and does his call every time the zoo train passes by. Hudson was rescued from South Lyon, Michigan, and only has half of his left wing. And more recently, Two-Toe was found in Commerce Township with a rubber band around his beak and buckshot in his leg. Zoo staff have helped him learn how to eat from a bucket with half of his beak, and they're looking into making him a new beak extension. The cranes have become just as popular as some of the more exotic animals that they have here at the Detroit Zoo.
Traveling in the fall from across Michigan and even from other states, they gather at Big Marsh Lake near Bellevue. Not just the cranes, but also the craniacs. Each October for the past 26 years, Crane Fest has attracted hundreds of people to enjoy a festival of artists, vendors, and food. But the main attraction is the flying of hundreds and sometimes thousands of sandhill cranes as the sun sets over the marsh. Crowds of birdwatchers assemble on the hill with their binoculars and cameras, waiting to see and hear the groups of cranes as they appear and then glide down to meet their friends on the ground.
What happens is up there, all of a sudden it gets cold. Everything goes into dormant and hibernation. They got nothing to eat, so they say, okay kids, we're going south, and they head this way. You are on 131 acres of the Battle Creek Kiwanis Youth Area. It's the only place at Big Marsh Lake that you can view the sandhill cranes and all the other birds. Now the Audubon of Michigan owns 1,200 acres out there called Big Marsh Lake. It's a perfect area for the sandhill cranes to roost at during the night so that the coyotes and the foxes can't eat them. They don't run well in 18 inches of water, so it's a perfect place for the sandhill crane.
really interesting to watch the thousands of cranes come flying in here and set their wings and plunk their butts in the water. So that's why I like being here.
I've been here, oh golly, I don't know how many times, but I've been here a lot of times in the past few years. What could beat that big field of sandhill cranes getting together to fly south?
I like coming over to the Crane Fest because watching the cranes is pretty cool and kind of fun.
Well, I like to see them, and we're going to hunt them in Michigan. The problems with hunting sandhill cranes is the whooping cranes are an endangered, very endangered species, and people will mistake them and they will kill whooping cranes.
It's exciting. It's awe-inspiring. Yeah, it's just exciting.
I've been coming to Crane Fest for probably 20 or so years. So I'm against sandhill crane hunting bills. They continue to be introduced. I continue to oppose those and will continue to oppose those so long as I'm in the Michigan legislature. Because they always introduce it, it gets a lot of attention, and we're fortunate we have so many birders out there because, you know, a long time ago we didn't have nearly as many sandhill cranes when people were shooting them out of the air as if they were the stake of the migration highway. One thing we can do is continue to advocate that wetlands are protected. We want to make sure that people aren't using and abusing wetlands in a way that's deleterious to use by migrating birds like sandhill cranes. So we'd certainly like to ensure that there isn't any mischief done in relation to how wetlands usage is regulated. But it's great to have this out here and see so many birders from around the region come into Cranedance Township.
I am a bird nerd. I would rather have pictures of birds than people, and I have just become infatuated with cranes.
They're such impressive birds to watch, and when they come flying in out here, I've never seen anything like it. There are thousands of them that come in, and they fly in and they drop their legs and then they just drop down
like airplanes
into the ground. It's really cool to see. So
they make you feel happy. You see a crane flying, and they make you feel good.
Sunflowers, high grass, and bare feet. Oh, but you each second is a treat. I keep my balance next to you. It's true. Nowadays there's nothing I wouldn't do for you. Fire breath and open sky. It's not what we know, it's where we go.
To learn more about sandhill cranes, I went to Kensington Metro Park in Milford, Michigan, and met with a naturalist there.
Hi, I'm Victoria Taylor Sluter, Western District Interpretive Services Supervisor here at Kensington Metro Park in the Huron-Clinton Metroparks. Kensington Metro Park is probably one of the most heavily visited metro parks in our system. So the reasons people come out here are so varied. One of the things that I think is really why people are driven to see them and enjoy the cranes here at Kensington is the fact that you can't go all over even Southeast Michigan and see them. The only way you can really care about these animals sometimes is to be able to see them face to face, to be able to experience them in your own life and not just read about them or see them on film. I overheard somebody saying, I hope we can see the cranes today. So it is something that people, they look forward to. They plan their visit around being able to see them. One of the things that folks notice right off the bat when they come out and visit is the cranes are always searching for food. There's a unique problem here at Kensington that we want to avoid. Cranes being fed, so much so that the only animals that we have called out by name. That's the kind of area right there that they will nest in, and you can just see how they just disappear. If they go in there and they build a nest down at the water level, those blades of foliage are much taller than they are, so it's perfect. They can just hide in there. And besides the fact that it's swampy enough, it would be difficult for a land-based predator to move through easily and sneak up on them. One other really important takeaway when I had heard about this project, If it weren't for wetland conservation and efforts to save enough of these wetlands up till now, the cranes would have been extinct in Michigan. They were nearly so just over 100 years ago, and it was just because enough of their habitat was saved that they were able to manage and survive and then thrive.
In the spring of 2019, the most incredible thing happened at Kensington Metro Park. A pair of sandhill cranes hatched a Canadian goose egg and began to raise the chick along with their own colt. This ugly duckling story went viral and even made it into the newspaper.
Kensington Metro Park, I believe it was in 2019, we had some reports of a gosling, a baby goose, that was mixed in to a family unit, a pair of cranes, and their one crane colt. And at first it seemed like sort of, well, that's abnormal, that maybe that's just happening for the moment, but then it was being cited day after day after day until it became really sensational. I think it actually even went viral that this crane family was raising this gosling. A lot of people were obviously taking photos, following the story behind how they were doing, coming out day after day to see the progress. But I think the story, as far as biology and nature goes, is actually even more fascinating. It has to be a pair of birds that happen to have precocial chicks. They have to use nest sites that are off of the water, the way that both cranes and geese do. Elevated sort of mounds in the marshy areas, they both use those. They have to have similarly sized eggs. So all of those things have to come together at the same time. And it did, right here in Kensington. Geese are one of those types of birds that are known for dumping eggs someplace. So maybe her nest was destroyed in some way. For whatever reason, this Canada goose had to leave her egg someplace, and I believe she left it in a crane nest when the crane parents were off for a little while feeding themselves, and this goose female dumped an egg there, and cranes can't count. The gosling obviously imprinted on the crane parents, and the sandhill crane parents, they were doing the same behavior they would with a crane baby. They were doing that with the gosling. They were not put off by this rather strange looking chick in the nest. They'll go around feeding most of the time a crane chick, but obviously in this case they were doing that as well with the gosling. And the time frame is that sometime in July, a young goose was found deceased within the park. This could have been a test flight accident. So it was only about 3 months where this special arrangement was to be witnessed within our park. And a lot of people did get some enjoyment out of it during that time.
When someone hears sandhill cranes do their calls for the first time, usually what they say is, what is that, some kind of prehistoric dinosaur? And it's interesting how we instinctively feel something about their voices that makes us understand how truly ancient they are, how they've been here, as we now know through fossil exploration, longer than humans, millions of years longer than humans have been around. They've been on this planet since the dinosaurs were here. And you can kind of tell that noise, that call, the way their legs look, their faces, their feet. It just seems ancient.
They make a particular sound in duet, the males and the females. It's almost, it's not completely synchronous. The male will start and the female will follow immediately after. And it can sound like it's coming from just one individual, but when you really listen, you can tell there's two that are doing this, and it can be heard from up to a mile away. So that bugling is definitely something you have to witness firsthand.
The calls that they do, because they are just so loud and it's so funny seeing them do it, because the way they like whip their head back and just go to town is hilarious. And you can hear it, you know if there are sandhill cranes, if you're inside the building, if you're out on the trails, you know where they are, and they're just so entertaining in that way.
One reason cranes have endured through time could be due to their ability to communicate with one another. The loud, penetrating call is produced by a 4-foot-long windpipe, but that is longer than their necks. The secret is that their windpipe, the trachea, forms a loop next to the breastbone before attaching to the lungs. This same concept is used in musical instruments.
Like humans, each crane has a unique voice that other cranes can recognize.
Cranes use their voices to indicate their territories, organize migration parties, issue warnings, celebrate the unity of a couple, or just for the fun of being together.
Sometimes it seems like we're living in the cranes' world. After all, they were here first. But other times we're reminded that they're trying to live in a world we've created too. And it can get confusing, like in the scene captured by my neighbor's doorbell camera. I'm not sure what that was all about. The cranes also have to share their scarce habitats with the other creatures that need them.
A lot of times I wonder, what's it like to be a crane? What do they see? What do they hear? Can they smell? So many questions about what it's like to be them. What it's like to have your eyes on the side of your head.
There's a word for the different way that animals perceive the world. Umwelt. For example, birds have 4 color-sensing cells compared to our 3. What do these feathers look like to them? Imagine evolving over millions of years a long-distance communication system, but then not being able to hear each other.
It's what we choose to be. We're beyond good. I've never been so ready. Fire breath and open sky. It's not what we know, it's where we go.
And, of course, what's it like to fly? To see the world from above, to go wherever you want, through the sky, using your own power. Humans have been trying different ways of flying for 100 years.
It's where we go. I grow wings and tell her goodbye. It's not what we see, it's what we choose to be.
Making a successful flying machine requires doing a lot of things right, as you can see here. Many people have tried to duplicate birds. The wings must be large enough, and properly formed, to develop lift equal to the weight of the machine and its pilot, at the intended flying speed. The machine must have enough power and efficient means of converting that power into propulsion in order to overcome the aerodynamic drag and maintain the intended flying speed. If it doesn't have enough power and propulsion, it will never reach flying speed and thus will never fly. It needs stability and controls to set the direction during flight. And finally, the wings must be strong enough to support the total weight. Or, in other words, it has to all hang together.
To learn more, I spoke with Ann Lacey from the International Crane Foundation through Zoom. She's one of the top experts on sandhill cranes in the world.
The International Crane Foundation is headquartered in Baraboo, Wisconsin, of all places. And this is the world headquarters for the study of cranes. And our mission is to safeguard cranes, the flyways, watersheds, and grasslands on which they depend throughout their range worldwide. In North America, there are 2 of the 15 species of crane, only 2, but they happen to be the most numerous crane species in the world, and that would be the sandhill crane, and the rarest of the 15 species, the whooping crane. What the International Crane Foundation has been involved in since 2001 is the reintroduction of whooping cranes into the eastern U.S., and that's a migratory population. To reintroduce a species is not as easy as just hatching an egg and putting it out in the landscape and saying, good luck to you. We hope you make it. So we do the breeding of the birds. We have expertise in raising these birds, both in costume and with real birds in captivity. And then they are released out into the wild. So it is not easy to reintroduce a species. It takes a lot of time and effort. And we've been doing this now for 20 years. And we're doing good. But we're still not at that self-sustaining level, so we still have a ways to go.
I asked Ann to explain what a genetic bottleneck is relative to the eastern population of sandhill cranes.
Our population, breeding and migratory, is separate from the population that goes through the Central Plains states. So yes, people may be familiar with the grand migration of sandhills that goes through Nebraska in the spring. It's just absolutely glorious. There's about 1 million birds in that population. And so genetically, they might be much, much more robust than our population. And so yet another threat that's much more invisible is that genetics. And by over-harvesting or having a disease issue or power lines taking out a lot of birds from any one breeding population, that genetic bottleneck then comes into play, and you can have kind of a depression in those breeding birds. The more mixing of these breeding populations that you have, the more robust the population will be in the end.
Cranes are omnivorous, and their diet consists of snails, crayfish, worms, mice, frogs, but seldom fish. Cranes need wetlands to find their traditional food. Due to human activities, Michigan has lost over 50% of its original wetlands, forcing the cranes to adapt. They've learned to eat waste grains of corn, wheat, and barley left behind on farm fields after the fall harvest. This provides a dense source of energy necessary for migration and clears the fields for the farmers. There have been incidents of cranes pulling up newly emerged corn shoots in the spring, which obviously those farmers aren't happy about. To address this issue, Michigan allows farmers to apply for depredation permits to shoot cranes shown to be a nuisance that cause economic loss on their property. the International Crane Foundation developed a more humane solution.
Cranes need that open, wide vistas so they can see, and that's a great place to raise their chicks. And farming often happens in very fertile soils that we have here in our glacial landscape that's right up to an edge of a wetland where sandhill cranes will nest. We were working with a company that already was working on humane bird deterrence in various ways. And so this was kind of a novel application of a chemical that plants produce to deter birds from eating fruit. And so it's like a bittering agent. It's why fruit is bitter before it's ripe, is because a plant does not want its seeds to go out into the world before they're ripe. Who knew plants were so smart? This company developed a taste deterrent based on that same chemical. It's an anthraquinone. And so by treating corn seed, putting a coating of this bitter substance on the corn seed, the cranes will go along, and they do have to taste it to know it's there, but they will pop one out and it tastes bitter, and they'll spit it out. I've seen it. It's very funny. And they might try another one, but then they think, okay, that food item is off the menu, and they will continue to forage in these agricultural fields on other things, because again, they are generalists and they're omnivores. So they will eat bugs and snakes and all sorts of, waste grain, things like that. Sandhill cranes are stubborn. They know where they want to be. And of course, they are territorial. And especially if they have young, they can't leave these fields. They have to stay in these agricultural areas that are within their territory. They can't leave if they have young. And so they're inspired to be there. So if we take this one food item off the menu, they don't do the damage any longer. So that's really what we're looking for, is to make sure that this damage is stopped. This is something that farmers can now buy. It's in the marketplace. They can apply it where it's needed. They don't need to use it where it's not. And farmers, of course, know where this crane damage will be, so that they can kind of predict that and use it where they need it. And so I like to think that it is a win-win for cranes and for the farmer in the upper Midwest.
Once I'd heard about the International Crane Foundation, I knew I had to go there. So we made the drive to Baraboo, Wisconsin. It was so exciting to be there. I just couldn't wait to see everything. The first exhibit was of sandhill cranes. Hi, guys. I could get so close to some of them. They have all kinds of crane-themed art throughout the property. It was magical to be there, my happy place. They have all of the 15 cranes from around the world on exhibit here. Each species has its own look and personality. The whooping crane exhibit starts with a sign counting how many are left on the planet. Going in and seeing 2 of them live right there was an unexpectedly moving experience. I wondered if they know about how hard some people are working to keep them in existence. They're just beautiful birds. So, remember that resolution to allow a sandhill crane hunting season in Michigan? Well, it came up again in 2021 and was referred by the Senate to the Natural Resources Commission. When I found out that the subject was going to be discussed at one of their meetings, I got in my car and drove up to Lansing. I went in the room and took a seat in the front with all my recording gear. No one asked. And here is what they talked about.
A waterfowl specialist from the DNR had prepared a presentation on the steps to establish a sandhill crane hunting season within the federal guidelines that would allow killing up to 10% of the estimated sandhill crane population. This hunting advocacy group expressed their support for the plan and made sure to point out that numerous game and non-game species are flourishing due to funding generated from hunting licenses and taxes on firearms and ammunition. An animal rights activist testified that the voice of the non-consumptive community was being excluded as the commission solely focused on the fewer than 7% of Michiganders who hold a hunting license. She questioned the commission's lament of the shrinking hunting population by stating they're ignoring the economic, social, cultural, and conservation benefits of the growing number of bird watchers and other outdoor enthusiasts. She added that providing novel opportunities to hunt sandhill cranes because their population may be able to survive does not represent the values of most Michigan citizens. This couple presented their extensively researched concerns around hunting the cranes, suggesting that the amount killed under depredation permits are undercounted. They also had data showing that the number of cranes in Michigan has been decreasing. Mary Jones appealed to the commission to consider how much people cherish the cranes and presented a picture of herself with one that had come up to her in a state park. Heather from the Michigan Audubon Society suggested that the science of ornithology should be leading this discussion, and that the risks are too high to allow the hunting of cranes in Michigan, which is their breeding ground.
Not for birds, not for Michigan residents, and not for
When asked by the commission about the desire to not waste birds that were killed under depredation permits, she reminded them that humans are not the only ones to consume meat.
omnivores in Michigan. And there's a great value in decay for lots of birds of prey that we all care about, as well as organisms that make up our ecosystems.
Right. I understand that there's different meat eaters in the world, so
And
I
one
understand
other,
that, and we won't debate that, but that's okay.
yes,
I've been a waterfowl hunter since 1966. Sandhill cranes is something new. They've always been known as ribeye of the sky because of the texture of their meat and the flavor of it. I would just really like to be able to try it, see how it tastes. I hunt geese, ducks, turkeys, deer. They all taste different, but they all taste good.
I think about why I'm okay with people eating the meat of some animals, but not other animals. It's kind of a paradox. Is it how smart they are, or how wild, or just how we feel about them? I don't know the answer to that.
In addition to concerns about hunting, other threats to cranes are loss of habitat, such as wetlands, and climate change. People are becoming more aware of the importance of protecting wetland ecosystems and biodiversity in Michigan. Some cranes stay in Michigan through December. They can be seen standing on ice or in water that is surely very cold. They stay warm by constricting the blood vessels in their feet, which reduces the amount of blood needing to be warmed. Their leg arteries and vessels are very close to each other, so colder blood gets warmed before it reaches the body. Most sandhill cranes head south in the fall. Pairs of cranes will travel with their young colts that were born in the spring and are now strong enough to fly the long distances and learn the route from their parents. Migrating cranes can travel over 200 miles a day. They often fly at altitudes of about 1 mile and might reach speeds of 50 miles per hour in the right conditions, by taking advantage of tailwinds, flying in formation, and soaring. All that flying requires a place to rest and meet up with other cranes along the journey. The eastern population of cranes take different flight paths from the north that converge in northern Indiana, 50 miles south of the Michigan border. It's a perfect place for the cranes to stop and gather in large numbers.
Increased every year.
When the cranes finally began to arrive, it was spectacular. One of the most incredible things I have ever seen in my life. We went back to Jasper Pulaski in the morning. It was so foggy that we couldn't see the cranes, but we knew they were there because we could hear them. I thought I could hear a whooper calling from the crowd. They come here too. As the fog lifted, the cranes began to fly up in groups. It was a different mood in the morning, with lots of excitement as the cranes socialized and prepared for the rest of their journeys. They're talking.
It's an exciting time for the cranes as they meet up with old friends, and the young single cranes search for possible mates. The cranes run, jump, and dance as they greet each other in the field.
I read somewhere that everyone in their life should get the opportunity to hear the sound of cranes over a marsh in the morning. It's definitely something that's going to stick in your mind.
Cranes are a harbinger of spring. Crane is there, then you know, okay, that's a good wetland. They pair for life. Year after year, they have these great pair bonds. They are loyal, great parents. They can look you in the eye. They're so beautiful. They are so graceful. Many a child has compared them to dinosaurs. Awe and wonder almost across the board. If you have a feeling about cranes, it will be awe and wonder. Because, again, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still look at them and go, man, you're a really cool bird.
One thing is clear. Many Michiganders are passionate about seeing sandhill cranes.
They're just fun to watch. If you get 8 or 10 of them together in a field, they will dance and play around like third graders. If you get 2,000 of them in the field, like I've seen in my backyard, they're just crazy to watch. I mean, they'll sit there and make you laugh.
Sandhill cranes make me feel like I'm in a completely different place when I catch a little piece of the sound that they make. It's an amazing sensory experience.
Sandhill cranes will face challenges in the future, but for now, we can still enjoy them, pausing to reflect on the lessons they can teach us if we stop and listen.
It's pretty quiet here in the winter when the lake is frozen. Until one day I heard that familiar sound. The cranes were back. I could see whole flocks heading north. I got my camera out because the cranes were acting crazy. I mean, they were going bonkers, and I'd never seen this kind of behavior before. They were so excited. All spring, I've been watching the cranes. This year, they built a nest, and we could see it right back that way in the tall reeds. And I couldn't see into the nest, but I could see them coming and going one at a time. One bird would fly in, they would call, and then the other bird would fly out. And so I kind of got used to their routines, but most importantly, I knew that they had a nest. So we've been waiting and waiting, and finally, May 3rd, they came out. Well, actually just one of the birds came out with what I finally saw was one chick, but the other one was still in the nest. So the next day, I waited and waited, and then both birds came out. I finally saw them together after months of one at a time, and they had 2 little babies. That was today, and here they are. They're the cutest things. I'm in love with them. I can't stop looking at them. They just walk around and waddle. The parents will feed them, and they will nudge them around to get them to go the right way. They just kind of take care of them. One's older than the other one. What I know about cranes is one will hatch on one day, and then the next day the other one will hatch. So right now we have 2 crane babies, each one day apart. The babies just take it to a whole new level. I hope they both survive. Today is their first day away from their nest, and they look like they're doing pretty good, and their parents are taking good care of them, but there is a lot of danger out there for a little baby crane, so we'll find out how they do.
The parents will take turns looking for food and being on the watch for potential threats.
They're the cutest, fuzziest little things ever, and I really do feel like the cranes brought them here to our yard to show me, because they're proud parents, and I'm proud of them.
It was hard to tell if the parents were favoring one of their babies over the other, weaker one. But I got nervous when the next day I saw the parent cranes and not the babies at first. You can see that I could get really close to the crane family, but it's important to know that I try to follow the Audubon guidelines for ethical bird photography. I never baited the cranes to come over. We have our feeders for small birds out of reach to the cranes. I never played recordings of their calls or did anything to try to make them react, and although I knew exactly where their nest was, I didn't go over there to look in, although I wanted to. Often, the family would walk right into my yard when I was already there. I'd like to think that after spending so much time together, they learned to trust me not to hurt them and maybe even felt safer with me and my camera around. And so, they would reward me with exciting footage of them preening, lounging around, and falling asleep. As the end of summer neared, the cranes weren't around as often, and then I didn't see them at all for quite a while. I was concerned, but I could hear them at night. Well, eventually I saw them on the other side of the lake.
I still remember the day that you came. You were so little. For me it's just a day. Now you're all grown up, tall as a tree, strong as a wolf pup, faster than me. So if you're worried that a chance will pass you by, and if you're standing on the sidelines wondering why, what's the worst thing that could happen if you tried? Well, you might fall, but then again, you might learn to fly. And don't be standing on the sidelines wondering why. What's the worst thing that could happen if you try? Oh, what's the worst thing that could happen if you try? Well, you could fall, but then again, you might learn to fly.
When migration time is coming, the cranes get excited. They dance around, throw sticks in the air, and ruffle their feathers. There is even a specific word for this behavior: Zugenru. I was delighted to notice the colts doing this, and then to see their parents eventually join in the fun.
The seasons are changing. The leaves are falling. A thin film of ice forms on the lake when the air is cold. That makes it harder to get traction during takeoff.
Flying low under the radar, like a nighthawk stealth plane, you are hiding out in the shadows, keeping from the light of day.
The crane family is watching everything that happens, like when other birds fly over on their way to migration.
Hey now, it's okay now. You don't have to hide from the world no more.
They're eating all day to get energy for their trip. I wonder how they will know when it's time for them to fly.
It's time to stand up straight and step into the light. It's time once and for all to have equal rights. Come along now. Hey now, it's okay now. You don't have to hide from the world no more. Hey now, it's okay now. You don't have to march in this lonely world. Hey now, it's okay now. It's your time to soar. Hey now, it's okay now. You don't have to hide from the world. It's your time to soar.
Now that fall is here, I know that eventually the crane family will be leaving soon. It makes me a little sad. I know I'm going to miss them. And when some of them come back, I don't know that it will be the whole family. Will they meet new cranes out there? They're a little young for that. Will they come back together? I don't know. But I've gotten so used to following their daily activities that it's going to be a change for me to see them fly off. Each time they fly south, I think, is this it? Are they going? But then the next day they'll come back and I get happy about it again. So soon they'll fly away and I'll miss them. But I know that at least some of them will be back again next year.